Marcus had always been different from other wildlife photographers. While his colleagues chased dramatic shots of predators hunting or animals in aggressive poses, he found himself drawn to quieter moments. He believed that every creature had a story beyond the fierce reputation humans had given them. The morning mist hung low over the Appalachian Mountains as Marcus adjusted his camera equipment. He had been tracking a particular black bear for 3 weeks now, not for any magazine assignment or photography contest, but because something about her behavior intrigued him. The locals in the nearby town of Cedar Falls had been complaining about this bear for months. They called her a nuisance, claiming she was too bold, too comfortable around human settlements. Sheriff Davidson had warned Marcus just the day before. "That bear's been getting into garbage cans, walking right through people's backyards like she owns the place. Fish and Wildlife says if she doesn't move on soon, they might have to relocate her. Some folks are even talking about having her put down if she becomes a real problem." Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this bear's story. He had observed her from a distance several times, and unlike other bears he had photographed, she seemed almost melancholy. There was something in her movements, a heaviness that went beyond the typical lumbering gait of her species. The bear, whom Marcus had privately named Luna because of a distinctive crescent-shaped mark on her forehead, was a medium-sized female, probably around 5 years old. She appeared healthy enough, with a thick black coat that gleamed in the sunlight, but her behavior was unusual. Instead of foraging in the deep woods where bears typically felt safe, Luna spent most of her time at the edges of human civilization. Marcus had set up his observation post on a rocky outcrop that overlooked a small clearing where Luna often appeared in the early morning hours. He had learned her routine over the past few weeks. She would emerge from the tree line just as the sun began to filter through the canopy, always moving slowly, always alone. This particular morning felt different. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the leaves were just beginning to show hints of gold and red. Marcus checked his camera settings and settled in to wait. He had learned that patience was the most important tool in wildlife photography. You couldn't force the moment. You had to let it come to you. At exactly 7:15, Luna appeared at the edge of the clearing. But today something was wrong. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that her usual slow pace was even more labored. She moved like an animal carrying an invisible weight, stopping frequently to look around with what seemed like confusion rather than the typical alertness of a wild bear. Marcus adjusted his telephoto lens and began taking pictures, but quietly, using the camera's silent mode to avoid startling her. Through his viewfinder, he could see Luna more clearly now. Her eyes, which should have been bright and focused, appeared dull. She sat down heavily in the middle of the clearing, something Marcus had never seen her do before. For nearly an hour, Luna remained in that spot, occasionally shifting her position but never getting up to forage or explore. Marcus found himself lowering his camera more and more, simply watching her with growing concern. This wasn't normal bear behavior, and his years of experience in the wilderness told him that something was seriously wrong. The sun climbed higher, casting dancing shadows through the trees, but Luna seemed oblivious to everything around her. She would lift her head occasionally, as if searching for something or someone, then lower it again with what looked like disappointment. Marcus began to piece together observations from his previous weeks of watching her. Luna's strange attraction to human areas, her solitary nature, her apparent lack of interest in typical bear activities like fishing or berry gathering. He had initially attributed these behaviors to individual personality quirks, but now he wondered if there was a deeper explanation. The wildlife photographer had encountered depressed animals before, though it was rare and often difficult to prove scientifically. Animals in captivity sometimes exhibited behaviors that suggested emotional distress, but seeing it in a wild animal was almost unheard of. Yet as he watched Luna that morning, Marcus couldn't shake the impression that this bear was experiencing something very much like grief. Around 9 o'clock, Luna finally stood up, but instead of heading back into the deep woods as she usually did, she began walking toward the edge of the clearing, closest to where Marcus was positioned. He held his breath, knowing that black bears had excellent hearing and could detect human scent from considerable distances. Luna stopped about 50 yards away from Marcus's hiding spot and sat down again. For a moment, Marcus wondered if she had detected his presence and was trying to decide whether he posed a threat. But then something extraordinary happened. Luna lifted her massive head toward the sky and made a sound Marcus had never heard from a bear before. It wasn't a growl or a huff or any of the typical vocalizations bears use to communicate. It was a low, mournful sound that seemed to come from deep within her chest. The sound lasted for several seconds and was followed by what Marcus could only describe as sobbing. The great bear's shoulders shook and tears began streaming down her face. Marcus had read about animals crying, but most scientists insisted that while animals could produce tears for physiological reasons, emotional crying was uniquely human. Yet there was no mistaking what he was witnessing. Luna was crying, and the sound of her grief echoed through the quiet morning air. The photographer found himself deeply moved by what he was seeing. He had spent his career capturing images of wildlife, but this moment felt different, more profound than anything he had ever experienced in the field. This wasn't just an unusual animal behavior to document. This was a glimpse into the emotional life of a creature that most people saw only as a potential threat. As Luna continued to cry, Marcus made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Instead of remaining hidden and simply photographing this moment, he slowly stood up, making himself visible to the grieving bear. It was risky, potentially dangerous, but something told him that Luna needed more than just a silent observer. She needed someone to acknowledge her pain, someone to see her as more than just a nuisance bear causing problems for local residents. Marcus stepped forward, his camera hanging forgotten around his neck, and for the first time in 3 weeks of observation, he and Luna looked directly into each other's eyes. The moment their eyes met, Marcus felt his heart pounding so hard he was certain Luna could hear it. Every instinct screamed at him to back away slowly, to avoid making sudden movements, to remember that he was facing a 200-pound wild predator. But Luna's response defied everything Marcus knew about black bear behavior. Instead of standing up on her hind legs to appear larger and more threatening, instead of huffing or swatting the air in warning, Luna simply looked at him. Her dark eyes, still wet with tears, held an intelligence and sadness that took Marcus's breath away. For several long moments, neither of them moved. Marcus had been charged by bears before, had been in situations where adrenaline and training were the only thing standing between him and serious injury. This felt completely different. There was no aggression in Luna's posture, no defensive positioning. If anything, she seemed relieved that someone had finally seen her distress. Slowly, carefully, Marcus took a single step forward. Luna watched him but didn't react with alarm. Her massive head tilted slightly to one side, almost like a curious dog trying to understand something new. Marcus took another step, then another, until he was close enough to see the individual hairs of her thick coat, close enough to smell the earthy wild scent that clung to her. When he was about 20 feet away, Marcus sat down on the ground, making himself smaller and less threatening. He had learned this technique from years of working with various wildlife species. By lowering himself to the animal's level, he could often establish a sense of trust and communication that would be impossible while standing. Luna continued to watch him with those incredibly expressive eyes. Then, to Marcus's amazement, she began moving toward him, not with the confident swagger of a dominant predator, but with hesitant, almost timid steps. She would take a few steps forward, then pause as if asking permission to come closer. Marcus remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Part of his mind was cataloging every detail of this unprecedented encounter, while another part was simply overwhelmed by the emotional intensity of the moment. When Luna was close enough that Marcus could have reached out and touched her, she stopped and sat down again. They remained like that for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Marcus found himself speaking softly to Luna, the way he might comfort a distressed friend. "Hey there, girl. What's wrong? What's got you so sad?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but Luna's ears pricked forward, indicating she was listening. The bear made that same mournful sound Marcus had heard earlier, but quieter now, more like a whimper than a cry. Without thinking, Marcus extended his hand toward her, palm up, the way he might approach a nervous dog. Luna looked at his hand for a long moment, then did something that would haunt Marcus's dreams for months to come. She reached out with one massive paw and gently touched his palm. The contact lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to send shockwaves through everything Marcus thought he knew about wild animals. Luna's paw was surprisingly warm, and despite her obvious size and strength, her touch was incredibly gentle. It was the touch of a creature seeking comfort, not threatening violence. After making contact, Luna settled down completely, lying on her side with her head resting on her paws. The position made her look less like a dangerous wild animal and more like an oversized, heartbroken pet. Marcus found himself adjusting his position as well, lying on his side so they were facing each other like old friends sharing a quiet moment. The morning sun climbed higher, filtering through the trees and creating a peaceful, almost magical atmosphere in the clearing. Marcus began talking to Luna more freely, telling her about his work, his life, his own experiences with loss and sadness. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to share so much with a wild bear, but something about Luna's presence invited confession. "I lost my dad last year," Marcus found himself saying. "Cancer. I was with him at the end, and I've never seen anything as heartbreaking as the look in his eyes when he realized he was going to die. You have that same look, Luna, like you've lost something precious and don't know how to get it back." Luna's ears moved at the sound of his voice, and Marcus could swear she was actually listening, actually understanding on some level. He had heard stories from other wildlife photographers about unusual animal encounters, moments when the barrier between human and animal seemed to dissolve temporarily. He had always been skeptical of such tales, attributing them to overactive imaginations or anthropomorphism. Now he was living such a moment himself, and it was far more profound than any story could convey. This wasn't just a bear tolerating human presence. This was genuine communication happening between two very different species, both of whom were dealing with pain in their own ways. As the sun reached its peak, Marcus realized he needed to make a decision. He could stay with Luna indefinitely, but eventually other hikers or park rangers might come through the area. If Luna was found in close proximity to a human, especially given her reputation as a problem bear, the consequences could be severe. But leaving felt like abandoning a friend in crisis. Marcus had never felt such a strong connection to a wild animal, and the thought of walking away from Luna while she was clearly in distress seemed almost cruel. He found himself torn between his rational mind, which told him this situation was dangerous and unsustainable, and his heart, which insisted that Luna needed help. The decision was made for him when Luna suddenly lifted her head and looked toward the tree line. Her body language changed instantly, shifting from relaxed to alert. Marcus followed her gaze and saw what had caught her attention. Two hikers were making their way along a trail about a quarter-mile away. Luna stood up immediately, but instead of running away as Marcus expected, she looked directly at him again. This time her expression seemed to convey a message Marcus interpreted as gratitude mixed with sadness. She touched his hand one more time with her paw, then turned and began walking toward the deeper woods. Marcus watched her go, feeling as though something inside his chest was being pulled apart. Just before Luna disappeared into the trees, she stopped and looked back at him one final time. In that look, Marcus saw a plea he couldn't ignore. She was asking him not to forget her, not to let her story end with her simply disappearing back into the wilderness. Luna needed someone to understand what was happening to her, someone to help her find a way through whatever grief was consuming her. As the hikers drew closer to the clearing, Marcus quickly gathered his equipment and headed back toward his vehicle. But even as he drove away from the mountains that day, he knew he would be back. Luna had trusted him with something precious, a glimpse into her wounded heart. The least he could do was try to help her heal it. Washington, November 8, 2024. The Federal Reserve raised the benchmark interest rate by 0.25%, marking its fourth increase this year to combat high inflation. The Fed chair stated this measure aims to control rising prices and support economic stability. Luna appeared in the clearing exactly at 7:15, just as she had every morning for the past month. But this time Marcus was waiting for her, sitting in the same spot where they had first made contact. When she saw him, Luna stopped at the edge of the trees, tilting her massive head as if trying to understand why the strange human had returned. Marcus spoke softly to her, using the same gentle tone that had seemed to comfort her before. "Hey there, Luna. I came back because I think I understand now. I know about your babies, and I'm so sorry for your loss." At the word babies, Luna's ears pricked forward, and she took several steps into the clearing. Marcus continued talking, telling her about his research, about Mrs. Thompson's memories of seeing Luna with her cubs, about the terrible flooding that had changed everything. You're not a bad bear. Luna, you're not causing trouble on purpose. You're just a mama looking for her little ones. And that's the most natural thing in the world. Luna approached slowly, just as she had 3 days earlier. But this time there was something different in her demeanor. She seemed less restless, more focused on Marcus rather than constantly scanning the area as if searching for something. When Luna settled down near him, Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her something he had prepared. It was a photo he had taken during his first week of observing her. A shot where Luna was sitting at the edge of a meadow, looking off into the distance with that characteristic expression of longing. This is you. Luna, this is what grief looks like. Marcus held the phone where she could see it, not sure if she would understand, but feeling compelled to try. I've seen that same look on people who have lost someone they love. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to miss them. Luna looked at the image for a moment, then made that soft whimpering sound Marcus had heard before. But this time, instead of the deep, wailing cry of their first encounter, it sounded more like a question, as if she were asking Marcus to explain something she couldn't understand. Over the next hour, Marcus found himself talking to Luna about loss, about grief, about the way love doesn't disappear even when the ones we love are gone. He told her about his father, about the months of sitting in hospital rooms, about the difficulty of accepting that some losses are permanent. The hardest part, Marcus said, is learning that missing someone doesn't mean you have to keep looking for them. Love doesn't require constant searching. Sometimes love means letting go. As if responding to his words, Luna stood up and began walking around the clearing in a pattern Marcus hadn't seen before. Instead of her usual aimless wandering, she moved with purpose, stopping at specific spots and sniffing the ground intently. Marcus realized she was visiting places where her cubs had probably played. Near a fallen log, she paused and touched the bark gently with her paw. At a small depression where rainwater had collected, she sat down and stared at the surface as if seeing reflections of memories. The wildlife photographer felt privileged to witness this private ritual of remembrance. Luna was showing him the geography of her loss, the specific places where joy had existed before being swept away by circumstances beyond anyone's control. When Luna completed her circuit of the clearing, she returned to Marcus and did something that took his breath away. She lay down next to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her thick fur, and rested her massive head on his lap. The trust implicit in this gesture was overwhelming. Black bears, even friendly ones, simply didn't behave this way with humans. Luna was treating Marcus like a member of her family, like someone safe enough to be vulnerable with. Marcus gently stroked Luna's head, marveling at the softness of her fur and the incredible privilege of this moment. It's okay to remember them, Luna. It's okay to love them forever. But you don't have to spend the rest of your life looking for them in places where they can't be found. They remained like that for over 2 hours, with Luna occasionally making soft sounds that Marcus interpreted as a form of communication. Sometimes she would lift her head and look directly into his eyes, as if checking to make sure he was still there, still listening. Around midday, Marcus heard voices in the distance. A group of hikers was approaching the area, and he knew Luna would need to retreat to the woods soon. But before they were interrupted, Marcus wanted to try something that might help Luna process her grief in a healthier way. He stood up slowly and walked to the center of the clearing, where he began arranging the wildflowers he had brought into a small circle. Luna watched with obvious curiosity as Marcus created what was essentially a memorial for her lost cubs. "This is for them," Marcus explained, "for the babies you loved so much. They can't come back, but that doesn't mean they're forgotten. Love never dies, Luna. It just changes form." Luna approached the flower circle cautiously, sniffing each bloom carefully. Then she did something that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. She gently picked up one of the flowers in her mouth and carried it to each of the spots where she had paused during her earlier circuit of the clearing. At each location, Luna would set the flower down briefly, as if leaving an offering, then pick it up and move to the next spot. It was a ritual of goodbye, a way of acknowledging what had been lost while also releasing her attachment to finding it again. When Luna had visited all the significant places in the clearing, she returned to the flower circle and lay down beside it. The change in her posture and expression was remarkable. For the first time since Marcus had begun observing her, Luna looked peaceful. The desperate searching quality that had characterized all her movements was gone, replaced by a calm acceptance. The voices of the approaching hikers grew louder, and Marcus knew their time together was ending. But as Luna stood to leave, she did something that convinced Marcus their sessions together were making a real difference. Instead of walking directly back into the deep woods as she usually did, Luna stopped at the edge of the clearing and began foraging naturally for the first time in months. She found a berry bush and began eating with genuine appetite, not the listless picking at food that Marcus had observed before. Luna was beginning to engage with life again, to find pleasure in simple activities that had been overshadowed by her grief. She was learning to live with her loss rather than being consumed by it. As the hikers entered the far side of the clearing, Luna looked back at Marcus one final time. In her eyes, he saw gratitude, peace, and something that looked remarkably like hope. Then she disappeared into the forest, leaving Marcus alone with the flower memorial and the profound realization that healing was possible, even for a heartbroken bear. The approaching hikers found Marcus sitting quietly beside a small circle of wildflowers, tears streaming down his face and a smile of pure joy illuminating his features. They asked if he was okay, if he needed help, but Marcus could only nod and point toward the trees where Luna had vanished. "I just witnessed a miracle," he told them. "I just watched someone learn how to say goodbye." Over the following week, Marcus established a daily routine of meeting Luna in the clearing. Each morning she would appear at the same time, but her behavior continued to evolve in encouraging ways. The desperate searching that had characterized her movements was gradually being replaced by normal bear activities: foraging, exploring, and even what appeared to be play. Dr. Sarah Chen had agreed to make several discreet observations of Luna from a distance, and she was amazed by what she witnessed. "I've never seen anything like this," she told Marcus during one of their evening phone calls. "This bear is demonstrating clear signs of psychological recovery. Her body language has changed completely. Her foraging patterns are normalizing, and most importantly, she's no longer exhibiting the repetitive searching behaviors that indicated severe distress." Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction hearing the professional confirmation of what he had been observing firsthand, but he also knew that Luna's healing process was far from complete. There were still moments when she would pause in the middle of an activity and look around with that familiar expression of loss. Still times when she would return to one of the memorial spots he had helped her create. The real test came on the 8th day of their daily meetings. Luna arrived at the clearing as usual, but instead of immediately seeking out Marcus for comfort and companionship, she spent nearly an hour engaging in typical bear behaviors before acknowledging his presence. She investigated a rotting log for insects, tested the water in the small stream that ran along the edge of the clearing, and even engaged in what could only be described as playful interaction with a butterfly that kept landing on her nose. When Luna finally approached Marcus, her entire demeanor was different. She was no longer the broken, grieving creature he had first encountered. The bear that sat down beside him that morning was alert, curious, and most importantly, engaged with the world around her rather than lost in memories of what she had lost. "You're getting better, aren't you, girl?" Marcus said softly, stroking her head. "You're learning to be Luna again, not just someone's missing mama." Luna made a soft chuffing sound that Marcus had learned was her way of expressing contentment. But then she did something that surprised him. She stood up and began walking toward the edge of the clearing, pausing every few steps to look back at Marcus as if inviting him to follow. Marcus had never left the clearing with Luna before. All of their interactions had taken place in that safe, neutral space where they had first connected. But something in Luna's behavior suggested this was important, that she had something to show him. Following a wild black bear deeper into the forest went against every safety protocol Marcus had ever learned. But his relationship with Luna had moved far beyond normal wildlife photography guidelines. He trusted her completely, and more importantly, she had given him no reason to doubt that trust. Luna led him along what appeared to be a well-established bear trail, moving with the confident gait of an animal in familiar territory. After about 20 minutes of walking, they emerged into a much larger meadow that Marcus had never seen before. This area was clearly significant to Luna. She moved through it with the kind of intimate knowledge that comes from frequent visits. The meadow was beautiful, filled with late-season wildflowers and bordered by a clear stream that would have provided fresh water and attracted the small fish that bears love to catch. Marcus immediately understood why Luna would have brought her cubs to this place. It was an ideal habitat for a mother bear raising young, safe, abundant with food sources, and far enough from human activity to provide security. Luna walked directly to a large boulder near the center of the meadow and climbed up on top of it. From this vantage point, she would have been able to watch her cubs play while keeping an eye out for potential threats. This had probably been her favorite spot during those precious months when her family was intact. But instead of exhibiting the restless, searching behavior that had characterized her visits to meaningful places, Luna simply sat on the boulder and surveyed the meadow with calm appreciation. She was visiting this place not to look for what was lost, but to remember what had been beautiful. Marcus climbed up onto the boulder beside her, and they sat together in comfortable silence for nearly an hour. The morning sun warmed the meadow. Birds called from the surrounding trees, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. It was a perfect moment of peace, made even more special by the knowledge of how far Luna had traveled emotionally to reach this point. When Luna finally climbed down from the boulder, she did something that marked a major milestone in her healing process. Instead of lingering in the meadow or revisiting the spots where her cubs had once played, she began exploring areas of the habitat that were new even to her. She was expanding her world again, seeking out new experiences rather than remaining trapped in the geography of her loss. Marcus followed at a respectful distance as Luna investigated a grove of oak trees heavy with acorns, tested a new water source, and even engaged in some experimental digging in an area that might yield roots or insects. She was behaving like a bear planning for the future rather than one trapped in the past. The most remarkable moment came when Luna discovered a small family of ground squirrels. Instead of ignoring them or seeing them as potential food, Luna watched them with what appeared to be genuine enjoyment. The squirrels chattered and chased each other around their burrow, and Luna's head moved back and forth following their antics like someone watching an entertaining performance. Marcus realized that Luna was rediscovering her ability to find joy in simple pleasures, to appreciate life's small beauties without the constant ache of loss overshadowing everything. She was learning to live in the present moment rather than constantly searching for a past that could never be recovered. As they made their way back toward the original clearing, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey he had witnessed. Luna had moved from inconsolable grief to acceptance to active engagement with life again. She had processed her loss, honored her love for her cubs, and found a way to carry that love forward without being paralyzed by it. But perhaps the most significant change was in Luna's relationship with the human world. During their walk back, they encountered a group of hikers on one of the main trails. Instead of fleeing immediately or showing signs of distress, Luna simply moved off the trail and waited patiently for the humans to pass before continuing on her way. She was no longer seeking out human areas because they reminded her of better times with her cubs. She was no longer avoiding human areas because they represented threat or loss. Luna had found a healthy balance, understanding that humans were simply part of the environment she lived in, neither to be feared nor sought out unnecessarily. When they reached the clearing where their friendship had begun, Luna walked directly to the flower memorial they had created together. But instead of lying down beside it in grief, she gently touched each withered bloom with her paw, then gathered them up and carried them to the stream. Marcus watched in amazement as Luna released the flowers into the flowing water, letting them carry away the physical symbols of her grief, while keeping the love they represented alive in her heart. It was a perfect gesture of letting go, of choosing to move forward while never forgetting what had been precious. As the flowers disappeared around a bend in the stream, Luna turned to Marcus with an expression he had never seen before. It was a look of completion, of gratitude, and of gentle farewell. Luna had found her way back to herself, and she no longer needed a human companion to help her navigate her grief. The healing was complete, and it was time for both of them to return to their separate worlds, forever changed by their extraordinary friendship. Marcus returned to the clearing the next morning, but Luna didn't appear at her usual time. For the first time in over 2 weeks, 7:15 came and went without any sign of the bear who had become such an important part of his daily routine. As the minutes stretched into an hour, Marcus felt a mixture of concern and pride. Luna's absence might mean she was truly ready to move on with her life. Around 9 o'clock, Marcus heard rustling in the bushes and felt his heart leap with anticipation. But instead of Luna emerging from the tree line, Sheriff Davidson stepped into the clearing looking puzzled and slightly concerned. "Marcus, I've been looking for you. We need to talk about your bear." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Has something happened to Luna? Has she caused problems?" Sheriff Davidson shook his head, but his expression remained serious. "No problems exactly. But something strange has been happening around town, and the residents are asking questions." The sheriff explained that over the past 3 days, several townspeople had reported unusual bear encounters. Unlike the previous incidents where Luna had been getting into garbage or wandering through yards in an agitated state, these new sightings were completely different. Mrs. Thompson had called to report that Luna had appeared in her backyard again, but instead of restlessly searching through the area, the bear had simply sat quietly for about an hour, then left without disturbing anything. The Henderson family had found Luna sleeping peacefully under a tree in their front yard one morning. When Mr. Henderson had gone outside to investigate, Luna had simply opened her eyes, looked at him calmly, then stood up and walked away without any signs of aggression or distress. Most remarkably, the Martinez family had discovered Luna playing gently with their dog through the fence that separated their yard from the forest. Both animals seemed completely comfortable with each other, and Luna had been careful not to damage the fence or show any threatening behavior. "It's like she's saying goodbye to the whole town," Sheriff Davidson said, making peace with all the places where she used to cause concerns. "The residents don't know what to make of it, but they're not complaining. Whatever you did with that bear, it worked." Marcus felt a warm glow of satisfaction mixed with a deep sense of loss. Luna was demonstrating exactly the kind of healthy behavior he had hoped to see. She was revisiting meaningful places not out of desperate searching, but as part of a natural process of closure and transition. "She's ready to move on," Marcus told the sheriff. "She's processed her grief and found a way to live with her loss." Those visits aren't signs of problem behavior. They're signs of a bear who is healed and is now saying goodbye to a chapter of her life. Sheriff Davidson nodded slowly. "Dr. Chen from the university stopped by my office yesterday. She said what you've accomplished here is unprecedented. She wants to document your methods for potential use with other problem wildlife." Marcus felt humbled by the recognition, but also protective of the privacy and dignity of his relationship with Luna. "I'm not sure what we did can be replicated. Every animal is an individual, and Luna was special. She was ready to heal. She just needed someone to acknowledge her pain and give her permission to let go." The two men talked for another hour about the implications of Marcus's work with Luna. Word was beginning to spread through wildlife management circles about the photographer who had successfully rehabilitated a grieving bear through patience, empathy, and understanding rather than relocation or euthanasia. But Marcus was more interested in Luna's current well-being than in any professional recognition his work might bring. That afternoon he drove through the areas where Luna had been spotted, hoping to catch a glimpse of her and assess her condition. He found her near the original meadow where she had taken him to show the place where her cubs had played. But Luna was no longer alone. She was walking alongside another bear, a large male who appeared to be courting her attention. The two bears moved together with the comfortable familiarity of animals who had been spending time getting to know each other. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears as he watched Luna interact with her new companion. She was animated and playful, engaging in the kind of social behavior that indicated she was not only psychologically healthy but ready to build new relationships and perhaps even start a new family. The male bear was clearly smitten with Luna, following her lead as she showed him around her territory. When Luna found a particularly good patch of berries, she shared the location with her companion. When he discovered a fallen log rich with insects, he stepped aside to let her feed first. Most touching of all, Marcus observed Luna taking her new friend to the meadow where her cubs had once played. But instead of the sorrowful, searching behavior she had exhibited in this place during her grieving period, Luna explored the area with obvious pleasure, occasionally looking back to make sure her companion was enjoying the experience as well. She was sharing her history with someone new, integrating her past experiences into a present that held the promise of future happiness. Luna had learned to carry her love for her lost cubs forward into new relationships rather than allowing that love to isolate her from connection. As Marcus watched the two bears together, He realized that his work with Luna was truly complete. She had not only healed from her grief but had opened her heart to new possibilities. The bear who had once cried alone in a clearing was now teaching another bear the geography of joy, showing him all the places where love and happiness were possible. That evening, Marcus called Dr. Chen to share what he had observed. The wildlife biologist was fascinated by this final development in Luna's story. "What you're describing is exactly what we hope to see in healthy wildlife populations," Dr. Chen explained. "Luna has successfully processed her loss and moved into a new phase of her life. The fact that she's forming new social bonds and potentially preparing to mate again indicates complete psychological recovery." Marcus asked about the likelihood of Luna returning to problem behaviors if she did have new cubs. "Very unlikely," Dr. Chen assured him. "Luna has learned to distinguish between healthy grieving and destructive searching. If she experiences loss again in the future, she'll have the psychological tools to process it in a healthier way. More importantly, she's demonstrated that she can form appropriate boundaries with human settlements while still maintaining her natural bear behaviors." Over the following days, Marcus received regular updates from townspeople about Luna's activities. She continued to visit various locations around Cedar Falls, but always briefly and peacefully. She seemed to be conducting a farewell tour, acknowledging the places and people who had been part of her healing journey. The last sighting came from Mrs. Thompson, who called Marcus personally to share what she had witnessed. Luna had appeared in her backyard one final time, but this visit was different from all the others. Instead of sitting and searching or simply passing through, Luna had gone directly to the spot where Mrs. Thompson remembered seeing the cubs play. Luna had spent several minutes at that location, not searching or crying, but simply standing quietly as if paying her respects. Then she had looked directly at Mrs. Thompson's kitchen window, where the elderly woman was watching. And Marcus swore that Mrs. Thompson's description suggested Luna had somehow understood that this human had cared about her family. "She looked right at me," Mrs. Thompson told Marcus, and I swear that bear nodded. Just once, like she was saying thank you for watching over them when they were little. Then she turned around and walked back into the forest, and I knew I wouldn't see her again. Marcus felt a profound sense of closure hearing this account. Luna had completed her healing journey not just by processing her own grief, but by acknowledging the community that had been part of her story. She was leaving with grace, dignity, and hope for the future. 2 months later, Marcus received a phone call that brought tears of joy to his eyes. Dr. Chen had been conducting her annual bear population survey when she made an extraordinary discovery. Luna had not only successfully integrated with the local bear population, but she was pregnant again. "She's denning about 15 miles from where you first encountered her," Dr. Chen reported excitedly. "Based on our observations, she should give birth sometime in late January." "This is remarkable, Marcus. Not only has Luna recovered from her grief, but she's thriving in ways that suggest complete emotional healing." Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions hearing this news: joy for Luna's new beginning, gratitude that she had found love again, and a deep sense of validation that their unconventional approach to wildlife management had been successful beyond their wildest hopes. The story of Luna's recovery began to spread throughout the wildlife management community. Marcus found himself invited to speak at conferences and consulting on other cases where animals exhibited signs of psychological distress. But he was always careful to emphasize that what had worked with Luna might not be applicable to every situation. Luna was extraordinary, he would tell audiences. She was an individual with specific needs who was ready to heal. What we did together wasn't magic or a guaranteed formula. It was simply two beings recognizing pain in each other and finding a way to help. Marcus continued to visit the clearing where he and Luna had first connected, but now he went there for his own healing rather than hers. The experience of helping Luna process her grief had taught him profound lessons about his own relationship with loss, particularly regarding his father's death. On one of these visits, exactly 6 months after Luna's final goodbye, Marcus was surprised to discover fresh bear tracks in the soft earth near the stream. His heart leaped with the possibility that Luna had returned, but as he examined the prints more closely, he realized they belonged to a much smaller bear. Following the tracks, Marcus discovered something that took his breath away. A young black bear, probably around 8 months old, was playing in the exact spot where Luna had once sat crying. The cub was healthy, energetic, and showed no signs of distress or abandonment. As Marcus watched from a distance, the cub's mother emerged from the trees. It wasn't Luna, but the way this bear moved through the clearing, the confidence and peace in her demeanor, reminded Marcus strongly of Luna's healed state. This bear was using the same territory that Luna had claimed during her recovery, suggesting that Luna's positive energy and healthy boundaries had influenced the entire ecosystem. Marcus realized he was witnessing the continuation of Luna's legacy. By healing in this place, by transforming it from a site of desperate searching into a location of peace and recovery, Luna had created a sanctuary that other bears could benefit from. Her journey from grief to healing had somehow blessed this place for future generations. That evening, Marcus sat by his computer and began writing the story that would eventually become a book about his experience with Luna. He wanted to share not just the remarkable facts of what had happened, but the deeper lessons about empathy, healing, and the unexpected connections that can form between different species. The book, titled When Bears Cry, A Journey Through Grief and Healing, became a bestseller that resonated with readers far beyond the wildlife community. People who had experienced their own losses found comfort in Luna's story, seeing in her journey a reflection of their own struggles to process grief and find meaning after devastating loss. Marcus donated a significant portion of the book's proceeds to wildlife conservation efforts, specifically programs that focused on understanding animal psychology and developing more humane approaches to wildlife management. He established the Luna Foundation, which funded research into animal grief and emotional healing. 3 years after their initial encounter, Marcus received the news he had been hoping for. Dr. Chen called to report that Luna had successfully raised 2 healthy cubs to independence. The family had been observed throughout the cubs' development, and Luna had demonstrated exemplary maternal behavior, suggesting that her capacity for love and care had been fully restored. "She's an exceptional mother," Dr. Chen told him, patient, protective, but also confident in allowing her cubs to explore and learn. Whatever trauma she experienced with her first litter hasn't interfered with her ability to bond with and raise these new babies. Marcus felt a profound sense of completion hearing this news. Luna had not only healed from her grief, but had transformed that experience into wisdom that made her a better mother. She had proven that loss doesn't have to define us, that healing is possible, and that love can triumph over even the deepest pain. On the 4th anniversary of their first meeting, Marcus made one final pilgrimage to the clearing where everything had begun. He brought with him a small plaque that he buried near the stream, marking the spot where Luna had first shared her tears with a stranger who had chosen to listen. The plaque read simply, "In memory of Luna's lost cubs, and in celebration of her courage to love again. Grief honored, healing embraced, hope restored." As Marcus sat in the clearing that day, he reflected on how much his life had changed since that morning when he had chosen to step out from behind his camera and connect with a grieving bear. The experience had taught him that healing rarely happens in isolation, that sometimes the most profound recovery occurs when pain is witnessed and acknowledged by another being. The work that had begun with Luna had expanded into a new understanding of animal psychology and wildlife management that emphasized emotional well-being alongside physical health. Marcus had become an advocate for approaches that recognize the complex inner lives of wild animals and the importance of addressing psychological trauma in conservation efforts. But perhaps the most important lesson Marcus had learned was that love and compassion can transcend species boundaries. In choosing to see Luna as an individual with feelings, needs, and the capacity for healing rather than simply as a problem to be managed, he had discovered possibilities that no one had imagined. As the sun set over the clearing that had witnessed so much pain and healing, Marcus felt Luna's presence in the peace that surrounded him. Somewhere in the forest, she was living her life fully, raising her cubs, and carrying forward the wisdom that had been born from her darkest moments. The bear who had once cried alone in despair had become a mother whose love would nurture the next generation, a survivor whose courage would inspire countless others, and a teacher whose lessons about healing would touch lives far beyond the forest where her story began. Luna's tears had watered the seeds of a more compassionate world, and her recovery had proven that no grief is too deep for healing, no loss too great for love to overcome. In learning to help Luna heal, Marcus had discovered his own capacity for compassion and his calling to bridge the gap between human and animal suffering. The clearing remained peaceful as darkness fell, holding within its boundaries the memory of tears transformed into hope, of despair blossoming into joy, and of two very different beings who had found in each other exactly what they both needed to heal.